Hey, what's going on, guys? Thanks for joining me for a look into Action Point, the 2018 film starring Johnny Knoxville, where we ask one simple question: what's the point of Action Point? Now, this movie has gotten some terrible reviews and a lot of hate, some of it warranted, some of it not. My overall opinion of this film was that it was bad, but it wasn't terrible. I thought this movie was genuinely funny and had a lot of great slapstick humor, and it really got a lot of laughs out of me. This is not surprising, considering I was a big fan of the Jackass movies, and this is really what Johnny Knoxville does best. Knowing all the stunts were real definitely enhances this film and works heavily in its favor. The movie does have a number of issues, however. Firstly, Knoxville himself. Quite simply, he's not an actor. Now, his acting wasn't terrible, but it was obvious with him as the lead that he was a little out of his element. This is amplified by the fact that he was paired with Eleanor Worthington Cox, who plays his daughter, and she's a very talented actress, and she really had one of the redeeming performances in the movie. However, the crux of the problems are plot related. While Knoxville isn't the best actor, he's not the best writer either. This movie is told as a flashback by DC, who's Knoxville's character, and I'll likely just continue to refer to him as Knoxville for the rest of the review. He's elderly, and he's telling the story of Action Point to his granddaughter. This vehicle through which to tell the story is largely pointless and doesn't add anything, and there seems to be more or less no real reason for its existence in the first place. There are a number of times I thought they would go somewhere with this format, either through Knoxville expressing an opinion or perhaps reflecting on his mistakes and learning a deeper lesson, but none of this ever happens. He's not trying to teach his granddaughter, who is a stand in for the audience, anything. He's just telling her a story. This is indicative of the fact that the film has no lesson to teach, it's just telling us a story. This is because I believe that this film, Action Point, has no point to make. When you break down the story beat by beat, you find that very little of consequence actually happens. The film begins with Knoxville describing his park, calling it a place where kids can just be kids, and yeah, they might get hurt from time to time, but that's all part of the fun. He seems to be setting up a message he wants to convey to the audience here about helicopter parenting and the importance of kids developing independence. However, this never really materializes. Immediately, we were told that Action Point is having attendance issues due to a more traditional theme park opening nearby, and that Knoxville was forced to take out a second mortgage from the bank, and he is in danger of foreclosing on it. We're also presented with Knobloch, a real estate developer who wants to buy Action Point from Knoxville, and he really serves as the main antagonist of the movie. Ultimately, it's Knoxville's money problems that serve as the primary issue for the film. However, this keeps getting repackaged in a different way to the audience over and over again and thrown at the audience like it's a new problem. To solve his initial attendance problem, he decides to quote unquote take the brakes off everything, meaning he's going to throw out all safety precautions in the name of fun and freedom. This makes little sense because the audience was led to believe that this was the big draw of Action Point in the first place. The attendance problem is solved really quickly after a montage, and the financial issues seem to be gone. But then the park gets shut down because of code violations with their makeshift petting zoo. But again, after another quick montage, the park is magically up to code. The bank then wants Knoxville to repay all the money he owes within 10 business days. However, this does not fundamentally change anything. All this does is add a definitive clock to an issue that already had one down the road. The movie does nothing with this 10-day problem, as Knoxville is able to increase attendance even more by filming a commercial, again through a montage. Eventually, Knobloch has his son go to the park and get injured on a ride intentionally, then sues Knoxville for damages. This is technically not how a lawsuit like this would work, but I'm not going to nitpick the movie for that. Knoxville is eventually forced to settle the suit by giving up Action Point and signing it over, which is really the only consequential plot point that happens in this entire film, Knoxville being forced to give up Action Point. There's a subplot with Knoxville and his daughter Boogie, but this story suffers from the same issues. Initially, despite not living with him regularly, it seems like Boogie and Knoxville have a very loving and just overall good relationship as father and daughter. The main issue is that Knoxville's ex-wife wants her boyfriend to be Boogie's legal guardian. However, she needs Knoxville's approval which we're told right away there's never really a possibility of him giving. The other issue is Knoxville not taking Boogie to see the Clash in order to work on his park, but this is made up for in a few minutes of screen time, and they move on like it's nothing. There's a small hint that work should come after family, but this point is never really touched upon either before or after this point in the story. There does seem to be a little of personal growth from Knoxville, but this is again dropped in order to resolve the rest of the plot. The relationship between Knoxville and Boogie more or less starts and ends in the same place, and this subplot is really just manufactured conflict with no real payoff at the end. The plot and the subplot are not really intertwined at all. It's almost two separate stories taking place over the course of the same movie, and any message they do have get muddled and lost in the sauce. Neither resolution to either plot gets time to have a bow wrapped onto it, or really given a final thought or chance to say what it wants to say. But it's time to answer the core question. What's the point of Action Point? Well, that's just the issue. The movie doesn't have one. Try as one might, there really isn't an underlying message to this film. There are hints of one, like whenever Knoxville talks about what he considers the quote-unquote nanny state, but they drop any sort of development these points get as the film progresses. Now, I'm not saying a film needs to have a deep or even coherent message in order to be entertaining, but if that's what you're looking for, then watching a Jackass movie is a much better option. This is why I think the movie lacks a point. Knoxville made a bunch of successful films that I enjoyed that didn't have points. However, I think going in another direction would have been nice. Knoxville has a line about Action Point being about what you can do, with other theme parks being about rules and what you can't do. This theme of personal liberties and sacrificing some safety in the name of fun and railing against the culture of helicopter parents is a route I wanted this movie to take. Sure, it might have alienated some audience members and angered some people, I'm sure, possibly even myself, but at least it would have been interesting. This movie is a lot like Action Point itself, an overall mess, but there are some fun parts. Overall, the movie isn't great, but there's nothing overtly offensive about it either. The runtime is about an hour 20, so it's not very long, and aside from some questionable acting, the movie's made well. The cinematography and the use of color is nice, and the movie overall is very visually pleasing. The soundtrack is awesome, with a lot of Clash songs, and this might have just been a problem on Hulu, but there were some audio inconsistencies for me. Whenever a person was talking on the phone, they were speaking at a volume that was really difficult to hear, and the movie made it seem like we were supposed to be listening in on the conversation. This happens more than once in the movie, but overall it's not a huge deal and doesn't really hinder my experience all that much. The movie has a 13% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but using Angry Joe's scale, because that's the one I believe makes the most sense, I'd personally give Action Point a 3.5 out of 10. I didn't find anything truly terrible in this film. It was just bland in almost every facet. See, comedy is kind of a cure-all for me, so the laughs it got definitely boosted its score. If you have nothing to do on a rainy day, I'd recommend you watch the Jackass movies first, but if you've seen them all and have some time to waste, this movie will probably make you laugh a few times. Anyway guys, thanks for listening. I'm working on a What's the Point of Man of Steel right now, but that might need to be pushed back depending on how my Arkham series progresses. We have a Smash Ultimate video coming out next, so be on the lookout for that if it's something you're interested in. And if you have any films you want me to try and find a point for, let me know in the comments. Until next time, guys.